Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to another Overly Sarcastic Productions reaction. And yeah, history summarized, Timbuktu. So yeah, funny thing, for the longest time, I didn't realize Timbuktu was an actual place. It's in that same category of, like, location whose name was used a lot in, like, old cartoons, and I just kind of got the whole sense that it wasn't actually a real place. Sort of, yeah, in the same vein as, like, Walla Walla, Washington, or like Albuquerque. You know, like a lot of those places where like Bugs Bunny would have said he had to have turned left at when in like those old like Looney Tunes cartoons. So color me surprised when I learned that Timbuktu not only was a real place, but it's a place in Africa. So yeah, I mean, besides the fact that it's in Mali, I don't know that much about it. But I mean, I guess with that being said, I mean, what better place to start than a summarization of history if you don't know, that much history about the place at all? So yeah, I guess with all that out of the way, we should probably get this thing started then, properly then. So of course, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day, and with all that out of the way, let's get this thing actually started then, shall we?
Africa's geography is as vibrant as it is varied, ranging from lush rainforests to snow-capped mountains, winding rivers to sprawling deserts, and plenty else in between. But among so many different climate regions...
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where you're surprised how big some places are just because you know how... I mean, that's the whole thing with maps. You're trying to get something that's a sphere into the shape of a flat rectangle, so of course there's going to be some distortion. But I mean, just the size of Africa... And the fact that that much land isn't producing that much, I mean, I guess, any value? I mean, of course, like, things are getting better over there. I mean, hopefully, I don't live there, but still, I mean, one can hope.
The most uniquely intriguing might be the Sahel, a band bridging the space between the sweltering Sahara Desert and the grassland savanna. This arid transition zone between the biomes shifts north and south with the seasons and lies just at the edge of permanent habitability before the ocean-like expanse of the desert begins. As pure geography, it's plenty neat, but this curious stretch of land happens to hold one of the remarkable surprises of African history, the great city of Timbuktu, a city that defies all logical city placement, yet thrived in medieval Africa, not in spite of the Sahel, but because of it. To see how, let's do some history.
I mean, once again, I know virtually nothing about the city besides the fact that it's in Africa. But given its location at the edge of a vast desert, I'm going to say that the reason it thrived was possibly, well, not possibly, but because of trade routes being like, oh, the last vestige of civilization before you have to go into the middle of a literal wasteland.
To best understand why Timbuktu was such a spectacular accomplishment of a city,
we need
to understand
where,
the
and
broader
why.
history of the region and why Timbuktu was perfect for it. As such, our tale begins in West Africa along the banks of the Niger River, a water feature running a crescent between Guinea and the Nigerian coast and brushing right up against the bottom of the Sahel, crossing through so many different cultures that it has unique local names in several different languages, such as Joliba, Isa, Kwada, and plenty others that I also wouldn't pronounce very well. The name Niger may derive from Jer and Amazigh, meaning river of rivers, which of course means that the Niger River is actually the River of Rivers river.
You gotta love translations, don't you?
Linguistics is fun, and etymologies have never caused me pain or distress. At least none that I haven't repressed. In any case, it's a long freaking river, and it served as a crucial waterway for the major West African empires, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. These three were far from the only players in the region, as the African savannah was bustling with people and cultures aplenty, but they were certainly the biggest boys across their combined millennium-and-a-half runtime. Reaching back farthest in time was the Ghana Empire, arising between the Niger and Senegal rivers sometime in the first few centuries AD. In their reign, they took advantage of two major developments in African history. First was the widespread use of camels for long-distance transit starting in the 4th century, an animal perfectly suited for the region. These so-called ships of the Sahara could make the desert crossing far quicker and more reliably than horses or donkeys, and with multiple times the cargo. The second was the advent...
That's another thing I forgot. And, like, I've heard that before, but I mean, the fact that you have something like the horse and stuff like that, that has been, a central part of animal husbandry in human culture for millennia. But then you have the fact that, like, the camel, something else that seems like equally ancient and stuff like that, but it only started the control and like riding of like camels and stuff like that only stretches back to like 400 AD or like around there. Or wait, did he say? He said the 4th century. So wait, that would be the 300s, I think. I don't know. Either way, the fact that like not domestication, but like control of the camel is that relatively recent compared to like the domestication of like cows, pigs, horses. That is absolutely just mind-boggling.
Of Islam across the Mediterranean coast of North Africa. From the mid-600s onwards, Ghana had a spectacularly rich trading partner just across the Sahara. Well, I say just.
Just, yes, that the big air quotes there.
It's a desert, but you know what I mean. Taken together, this meant the Sahel controlled the flow of resources between the savannah in the south and the camel caravans across the desert to the bustling cosmopolitan Mediterranean up north. And that's some big business. Gold, ivory, rock salt, food, and slaves. Terrible as that obviously is, this was part and parcel for the classical world, and even if leagues below the industrialized scale and brutality of the triangle trade, this is still icky as hell. In time,
it's
however,
still literal slavery.
Export would eventually,
even if it is a different, I don't know how you call it, flavor of slavery as happened, later on, but still, still human beings.
Become books. Much better. Now stick with me for a minute and I'll show you how. Sometime in the 1100s, at a spot where the northernmost bend of the Niger River meets the Sahel, a seasonal outpost of Tuareg nomads coming down from the Sahara became a permanent settlement. One legend holds that the nomads would leave the camp in care of a woman named Buktu and naturally called it Buktu's place, or in Tuareg, Timbuktu. Ta-da! Now this is cute, but abundantly made up.
Yeah, that just seems a little too fairy tale-ish.
Actual etymology is contested at least 4 ways, and I refuse to hurt myself like that twice in one video. But one way or another, Timbuktu was perfectly situated to take advantage of the desert caravan routes to the Med and east-west river transport to the
giant
Savannah,
water source right there.
South of them and serving as a gateway to the north. Being a city in the Sahel of all places is a tricky proposition, but Timbuktu worked perfectly.
I mean, what did I literally say? The fact the city prospered because of trade?
Around this time, the power of the Ghana Empire began to wane, and while the exact causes aren't quite clear, the effects and outcome are obvious enough, as local players asserted themselves and chipped away at central authority, culminating in the Malinke king Sunjata establishing the Mali Empire in 1235. This is so big of a deal that the subsequent epic of Sunjata is possibly the most renowned piece of African literature ever, having been transmitted orally by griot storytellers for centuries before formal codifications in the 1900s. This is, frankly, entirely too cool to relegate to a tangent, yet way too important to just skip over. So,
Well, Blue, you know what you must do. I expect to see a full video on this topic in the near future.
Witness the historian's plight. Too much cool, not enough videos. Yet. Ultimately, the Mali Empire grew beyond the bounds of its predecessor to reach from the Niger River all the way to the western coast, and the empire's rise in the region corresponded with the growing prominence of Islam. As mentioned earlier, Muslim merchants crossed the Sahara starting in the 600s and 700s, but it took a while before Islam made its big splash. Ghana allowed Islam, but sources differ on quite how much and how enthusiastically. By the Mali Empire, however, the second Mansa, or king, converted to Islam and went on a pilgrimage to Mecca in the 1260s or 70s. That's a
Mecca's just a big clunk.
Contact and conversion, and this slower process meant that traditional African religions had time to partially syncretize with Islam for a distinctly West African blend. To the shock of travelers like Ibn Battuta, who had no idea what to make of Malian Islamic dietary practice and standards of dress retaining so much local flavor. Granted, he was very impressed with the Malians' commitment to a more orderly and just society than he'd seen anywhere else, so credit there. Bottom line is that by the 1300s, West African Islam was plenty devout, but still plenty distinct. Then finally, all these plot threads with the empires, the religion, and the city come together in 1325, as Timbuktu's place in the world transformed entirely when Musa, the ruling Mansa of the Mali Empire and possible richest man in world history—
Oh, that was him, right? Yeah. I've heard, again, that's another guy I've heard. I mean, again, the first time I heard of him was in the History of the Entire World, I guess. But yeah, he just went around not Africa, but like Northern Africa, spending wild amounts of money and absolutely destroying the local economy.
returned from his Hajj. In taking the holy pilgrimage, he brought with him tens of thousands of pounds of gold that he happily distributed as he went, casually giving some towns a formative experience with hyperinflation and searing West Africa's new reputation for splendor into the popular conscience.
As I said, ruining the local economies.
Mansa Musa brought back scholars, artisans, and architects from across the Muslim world, and on his return home, he peacefully annexed Timbuktu into the Mali Empire and filled it with all of his new smart boys. Since its founding, Timbuktu had grown wealthy from trade, but this moment transformed it into the scholarly capital of West Africa, with what would become the largest library in Africa since Alexandria. A local proverb says that salt comes from the north, gold from the south, and silver from the country of the white men, but the word of God and the treasures of wisdom are only to be found in Timbuktu. So how did this transformation come about? First, of course, was the influx of smarty pantses, but second was new city infrastructure to facilitate the great and smartening.
Always need infrastructure.
The city's Sankore Mosque was expanded to a madrasa, a university-esque institution for Islamic study. Like elsewhere in the Muslim world, this included theology, mathematics, literature, and poetry.
Okay, well, there's this picture. You see, like, ancient walls, the ancient building in the back, and then there's just a loudspeaker right there. I mean, I know it's there for a reason, but still, that is funny how just anachronistic it looks.
Medicine, law, and philosophy. The Djinguereber Mosque and Madrasa sprang up 2 years later in 1327 as another major hub for scholarship in the city. Beyond these main pillars, learning happened all across town in over 150 primary schools and in the home libraries of private teachers. By the 1400s, Timbuktu had a population of 100,000,
again, loudspeaker,
being students from near and far. That century also welcomed the third madrasa, as Sidi Yahya was completed in 1440. All three were originally designed in traditional West African style, being made of limestone or earthen bricks covered in layers of wet soil called banco, which brings a very naturalistic appearance as if the structure is a seamless extension of the ground beneath it.
Oh, that's what they're made of. I was wondering, if you go back to that last picture, I was looking at this like, oh, okay, that's made out of brick. I was like, oh, that's a different type of brick. And then I looked over here, like off to the right of the picture, and it looked like, oh, that's a really a weird form of graffiti. They just outlined the bricks in like black and white paint. But if it's literally just the stone, but it's covered in the mud, I wonder how that started though. Because I think, I could see maybe as like a form of erosion protection. You have like the main actual structure being like the stone, but then it's covered with like what is essentially literal dirt. So that erodes from like wind, the occasional rain and stuff like that, but then it can be easily replaced because, it's literal dirt. And then the stone underneath is, very much fine. Okay, that's cool. Okay.
Covered in layers of wet soil called banco, which brings a very naturalistic appearance as if the structure is a seamless extension of the ground beneath it. This serves a theological point as it draws a connection to living and dead ancestors that's characteristic of West Africa's distinct Islamic practice, but it also creates that stylistic cohesion I'm just powerless against. Granted, over time the material erodes, so it needs yearly reapplications of banco after the rainy seasons, which is why the minarets are dotted with wooden beams called torons. It's a form of scaffolding that lets people climb all around it when replastering.
I was going to ask about that too. I just thought it was, supports for like internal supports that were just sticking outside the wall. But, it's stuff like this. I got to remind myself, most stuff, especially on older architecture, older styled architecture like this, there's a reason why it exists. And the people who build it usually aren't idiots.
This also gives each year's volunteers an active and continuous role in the preservation of their heritage, which is way cool. The rigid
that is really cool.
Garden-like quality that's thematically beautiful to contemplate. Compared to elsewhere, these mosques are very humble, but the raw meaning layered into their construction and the scholarly purpose they so excellently served make them something truly emblematic of West Africa's history. But there was one final gem in Timbuktu's crown, and that is its books.
We're back on the books.
The city took physical shape in over 700,000 manuscripts, most written fully in Arabic, but many are in Ajami, several local West African languages transliterated with Arabic script. Over in Baghdad, the Ghanims get everything into Arabic as the imperial standard, but here the far more locally rooted style of Islam celebrated and elevated the native languages. By the 1500s, Timbuktu was sub-Saharan Africa's house of wisdom, having passed from Mali's sovereignty into the Songhai Empire, yet rising to even greater splendor and prestige. In an account by the Andalusian traveler Leo Africanus, the city abounded with scholars, doctors, and judges, and the city's most prized and lucrative export was books. Now that's a culture victory in real life if I've ever seen one. Despite never serving as an imperial capital, Timbuktu had a Babylon quality of civilizational importance transcending mere states. It was a big-ass deal. However, the world around Timbuktu was changing rapidly in the 1500s. Portuguese sailors bypassed the camel caravans by sailing around the coast and severed the city's economic power. Then, in 1591, a Moroccan army sacked the city, punished scholars, and confiscated books. From the 1600s onwards, it was just a city on a river at the edge of the desert. But the people of Timbuktu were one thing above all else: clever. And in the face of outsiders who would destroy or plunder their books, cough cough French colonization in 1893, they hid them down the generations, in cellars, underground, in the desert, in caves, anywhere. And there's currently an international effort to find and catalog these hidden treasures of paper and ink. There's so much about the history of Timbuktu that I find so fascinatingly plural. It's part of such wide-ranging histories, yet so vibrantly particular to its local context. It's at the geographic edge of impossibility, yet characterized by the presence of so many people from the region and beyond. It's comprised of and representative of so many things, people, and ideas, yet it remains so unwaveringly, inimitably itself. Timbuktu is as varied as it is vibrant. Boom! Full circle, let's go. Thank you so much for watching. This video was a joy and a surprise.
I mean, it's stuff like that you just can't help but, like, remember just, like, I mean, there is barely, like, a place on Earth where there isn't, like, some form of beauty or majesty in, like, something. And that does make me feel sad, because, like, of course, like, in Africa, they were lucky enough, they were able to write stuff down in, like, Western Africa, but I know there are other places, and a lot of peoples and a lot of traditions were just, you know, have been forgotten because of, you know, maybe outside interference, but also just the combined fact of, you know, stuff wasn't written down because of just the culture, because there were, you know, large groups of people at a time that were still nomadic. And, you know, when you're nomadic, you don't carry around a lot of stuff that's not, you know, useful in everyday life. Or, you know, other stuff that was destroyed, and, like, it really is good. I mean, like, forgetting modern day, like, religious politics when it comes to, like, how, like, Islam interacts with, like, the outside world in a few places. It's stuff like this that I really wish that we could get back to, just where, like, yes, they were a different religion, but, like, they were so focused on, like, the gathering and the discovery of knowledge. It helped everybody. It really is just wonderful. But, I mean, I guess, yeah, with all that out of the way, we should probably end this. So, of course, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day. And with all that out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.